100 days of the Trump presidency, we are still here, right? We are still ourselves, right? 100 does not sound nearly long enough for what we've experienced. But I was trying to figure
No.
out why does everybody care about 100 days? And it turns out that FDR, when he came in 1933, did so much legislation, created the New Deal programs all in his first 100 days that was now the new benchmark for success. You're very successful if you do a lot in your first 100 days, and it's supposed to be a predictor of your key themes and policies to come. What I find ironic about
Yeah.
Trump's first 100 days is that he's done pretty much everything to unwind the New Deal programs.
Hey, Nayyera, it is good to be with you again back here on Trailblaze.
It is.
Let's figure out what's going on in the world. It's an amazing week. This is a big week, Nayyera.
Apparently 100 days, right? 100 days of the Trump presidency. We are still here, right? We are still ourselves, right? 100 does not sound nearly long enough for what we've experienced. But I was trying to figure out why does everybody care about 100 days? And it turns out that FDR, when he came in 1933, did so much legislation, created the New Deal programs all in his first 100 days that was now the new benchmark for success. You're very successful if you do a lot in your first 100 days, and it's supposed to be a predictor of your key themes and policies to come. What I find ironic about Trump's first 100 days is that he's done pretty much everything to unwind the New Deal programs. Everything, all the security that they offered, the federal government expansion that they offered, like Trump's like, I'm done with that. Take away all of those things.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And we have seen over time that this 100-day mark is totally made up. It's just something that the media created, whatever it was in the 1940s. But it is something that we do pay attention to. And, people get judged on it. What we do know is like some people do get bad grades and their 100-day mark, like Bill Clinton got bad grades his 100-day mark, but then he ended up winning re-election, 4 years later. So we do know it's not exactly a predictor, but it is a predictor of where we are. One thing that did happen to Bill Clinton is 2 years after he got elected, he lost the congressional majority, right? And so we do know that the congressional majorities tend to go along with the president's approval rating. And if Donald Trump can get his approval rating up, that is good news for the Democrats.
Well, the idea being that Congress would actually be able to do something, but Congress right now has the ability to do something. It's not just about the fact that they are of the same political party in the House and the Senate as the president, but the president is actively attacking Congress's power. And our founders would be horrified. They would not understand why Congress is just sitting back and allowing the executives to take more and more power when they put Article 1 in the Constitution as Congress for a reason, because they wanted the people and not an executive to become tyrannical. And that's going to be the lasting legacy of Trump, is just how much he has bulldozed over rule of law, the idea of balance of power, and really trying to get as much power for himself as possible. One of the examples that I think we forget in this 100 days with everything we've experienced is that Trump, in his first couple of days, came in and pardoned every January 6th offender, about 1,500 people, many of whom already had prior criminal records. So he came in saying it is okay to be violent and to try to overturn an election as long as it's in Trump's name.
Right. And right, he did so many things. Trump did so many things when he was just in these first 100 days that really just seem amazing for us to even imagine someone would do this. Someone who was impeached because of January 6th, impeached because of it. And in a bipartisan way, Republicans voted for that impeachment, both in the House and in the Senate, that he would then come in office and absolve the people who committed this crime against the government, tried to stop the government from the peaceful transfer of power, and then that would be okay. We know that what he did was after that he hired his billionaire buddy, the guy who put $250 million into his campaign, to come in and help dismantle the government that you were just talking about. It's literally just ripping the wires out of the machinery without paying any attention to what was going to happen. And so moving so fast, because the tech people like to say we're gonna move fast and break things. Well, they did that. They moved fast and they broke things, and now we're all figuring out how to put those things together. And it was so mean. I mean, I think this is the thing that I think people are paying attention to. So mean. It challenged things that like Medicaid, right? Where not just poor kids, but middle class people, working class people pay attention to their health care, and they get their health care because of Medicaid. It challenged things like aid to families overseas, from USAID, and really is ripping up the American brand all over the world, because America is becoming a place that you can't count on. And, so fast, so mean, but then also so dumb. Right? It's
Mm.
so dumb. These guys went out there, and both from putting a tariff regime in place that's threatening the entire global economy, to then also trying to do text message war plans on iPhone apps. Like, people know better than this being the kind of thing that you ought to be running a government with. I just think that's one of the reasons why Donald Trump's approval numbers so far are so bad. Not to leave you with this number, I was just looking it up a second ago, because there are two of them. One was the NPR poll, and NPR has him 2 times more people give Trump an F than give him an A. 45% of people give Trump an
Mhm.
F grade in his first 100 days, including 49% of independents. Another 5% of independents give him a D. So then I was like, well, what about Fox News? Maybe Fox News is standing up for their guy, right? He's a Fox News guy. But even Fox News, he's underwater on approval with Fox News. 47% approve, 48% disapprove. So a little bit better, but still people don't approve of him. And on the economy, 38% approve, 56% disapprove. And that was supposed to be Donald Trump's strength. So at a 100-day mark, people don't buy the bullshit.
Here's what I wonder about when I hear these polling numbers. I'm like, okay, there's a couple of points difference. He's under, he's over. There's always around the range of something between 40 and 50. Breaking 50 is huge for any president. I'm like, well, are they polling? Who are they asking this question? Because 90 million people didn't participate in the last election.
Right.
Right. And I can even feel around me that those people are now awake and aware and frustrated with the
Mm-hmm.
reality now that they've recognized, oh, the federal government's actually responsible for a lot of the things I liked about my life. The
Right.
idea that the Make America Healthy Again movement has decided that they are going to stop USDA inspectors who are going to be looking at chicken to see if there was salmonella. You want to stop chicken from being inspected for salmonella. So you want salmonella in the supply chain? Like, that's because
Right.
companies
And
think that
bird
these
flu,
types of
right?
yeah, because companies think that these regulations are onerous and they get in the way of us doing business. Yeah, I want to make sure our food is safe. Like, that is the fundamental promise of the federal government, is that the regulations they will use will be to keep us safe and healthy. Right. So they're doing that. At the same time, they'll say things like, oh, we banned artificial dyes in food. No, they didn't. They said they did. They said they did. They didn't issue a single memo, no law, no legislation, nothing. So they're just saying they're doing stuff, but you're going to continue to look at your food and your snacks and candies and see all the artificial dyes still there. Most of them are still FDA approved. They're still considered safe. So they want the show. They want the credit. They don't want to do any of the hard work that actually comes with governing.
Right. And they don't want to do that. And look, this goes back all the way back to the muckraking era, right, where people were writing stories about how we didn't have great food cleanliness. People were getting sick about food, and so the fact that we are now in this position where we're fighting these fights again. We've talked about this before. These guys, I call it the Great Reclamation, right? They're trying to reclaim all the rights that we've taken over the course of the last 80 years and in 100 years even, and take us back to an era. They said it, from 1870 to
Mm-hmm.
1913. They believed that was the golden age of America, before the income tax, frankly, before women had a right to vote, during
Mm-hmm.
Jim Crow segregation, right? Business people, big business people, were able to make all the decisions. And
Mm-hmm.
so they want a world where big business people can make all the decisions and everybody else is just sort of catching up and catching what they can. That's not the world that the country spent 100 years trying to get out of, and trying to create a place where everybody can survive with some level of security, that the government was watching out for their
Mm-hmm.
basic, small best interest.
Basic.
Not all the best interest, just little, not dirty meat. Maybe we could just
And
start with that.
even
Not dirty meat.
let's start with, we're still not as socially responsible a government as Europe, right? We fought for the 40-hour work week, the labor movement. Bless them, they got us weekends. The
Yes.
Europeans get
No
vacations,
child
and they
labor.
actually take it,
Right.
right? All of that.
Yeah.
They have there's challenges with their healthcare system, but at least recognize that basic healthcare is a right. You should not be going into bankruptcy because you delivered a baby or you had cancer, right? Like, that's not That's not how things should be. So we are still, even at this level, far behind the social advancement, the educational advancement that we see in other countries that have similar GDP and similar backgrounds as the United States. The idea of, right, as you call it, the reclamation and going back to this pre-Gilded Age time of the robber barons and oligarchs got to decide everything. That's also where this tariff idea comes from, is that you can run a
Mm,
country on tariffs and no
mm,
taxes. Therefore, you don't, but then they also don't really have public infrastructure. Who needs highways or public schools? They'll just do away with all of that, figure it out yourself. But what the result is now is that we're seeing that tariff that Trump had touted and announced and almost crater the global economy, crash the stock market as a result of it, that's going to result in a nearly 30% increase on consumer goods. Everything, food, toys, products from, the grocery store, 30% increase. That's what we end up doing so that Trump can turn back the clock.
yeah, I was watching, during times like this, I try to watch some of the financial news and because I'm going to see what people are talking about. And one of the big indicators people are worried about are the occupancy rate for container ships. And the
Mm-hmm.
occupancy rate for container ships are down. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
That means products that are coming from China, coming from Asia, coming from other countries that comes to the United States. They said it's about 8 weeks to get off of a factory line in China, get onto a boat, get to the United States, get onto a truck, get to your store. Right? It's about 8 weeks between the two. And if the occupancy rate is down, I don't know, let's say 30%, 40% from China, then that means you aren't going to have goods on the shelves. And you know what happens when you have a limited number of goods? It's basic economics. Limited number, prices go up. You add a tariff to it and you cut the supply, you're going to have more demand and you're going to then have higher prices.
Let's go up.
So this is going to happen to people all over the place. And there were all these conversations about small business owners, right, who have these stores and these shops and they can't afford to buy ahead. A lot of big companies bought ahead to get ahead of the tariffs.
Mm-hmm.
Small business owners that can't afford to do that.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them are going to go out of business because they aren't going to have products and they're not going to be able to absorb the cost. So if you were going to go to your local market and buy, I don't know, a t-shirt, let's just say like a t-shirt that used to cost you $3 and now it's going to cost you $5, would you buy it from that store or would you go back to Target and get it for $4.10 or whatever it is? People are going to go out of business. And this is going to be the Trump economy. It's going to crash the entire thing there.
Well, you already have the port of Seattle pretty much empty because just a short ride away is Vancouver. And that's another
Mm,
port. And the Canadians are
right.
far more receptive, right? They're not pulling the shenanigans Trump is. So you are seeing this direct impact that's going to impact not just Washington State, but all the goods that we usually have trickle out from there throughout the rest of the economy. Another place you're going to see this is healthcare costs. So dentists and orthodontists, all of the equipment and inputs, some were able to buy ahead, most weren't. That all comes from overseas, right? Whether it's the implements or the stuff you're putting in. So yeah, expect those bills to go up, or just expect people to not show up, right? The people,
Those
because the
guys who are,
costs are rising.
if you aren't watching this on YouTube and you were just listening to it on the podcast, Nayyera was putting things in her mouth, like stuffy
Yeah,
things.
like like
She was miming, miming orthodontics.
grills, grills. By the way, grills. Not.
Yes.
If I had to get braces again, I'd call them grills. Let's be clear, they'd be gold.
Yes.
They would
Right.
not
That's
be
going to be,
the silver that we used to have.
I
Um,
love that. Yeah.
yeah,
In my
which I
day,
guess that's
if
the
your
one thing
braces
that
were
healthcare
gold, it means they were
wise.
dirty.
Well, I guess that's the one thing that we would be worse off than the Europeans, is that suddenly we wouldn't have the best teeth in the world, right? And you make it too expensive,
Exactly.
and then we've got janky European teeth now too. So
So you were saying a second ago, Nair, you were talking about Congress and how Congress is not doing its job. And it just struck me about something I've wondered about over time. And now I found myself on the other side of it. But now in this moment, I, I agree maybe with some of the reformers on this. What it's like we have a parliamentary style political practice, right? The leader says something and everybody in the leader's party goes along with it. But we don't really have a parliamentary style government, certainly not a parliamentary style legislature. Is it time for us to have a multi-party Congress? Is that maybe
I
the
mean,
only
I
way out of this? Is that you've got to assemble coalitions every time you want to do something and not just count on rote Democrat versus Republican politics?
I mean, in theory, we do kind of have some of that. Like working families parties, usually to the left of the Democratic Party, and they co-endorse Democratic candidates. And Bernie Sanders is, the famous independent who also, of course, challenges the Democrats to be more progressive, but also votes with Democrats. But that whole idea, right, of
But do we need
multi-party
a working families
democracy.
caucus in Congress, right? Do we need like
Well,
the
the
actual
thing
working
difference I
family
think is,
candidate?
I think what the big difference about the parliamentary democracy is that those coalitions actually have the power to change government. They can call a vote of no confidence at any
Mhm.
time. They are able to remove the head of state. And we don't
Right.
have that. We have this crazy impeachment process, and you can show all the evidence you want, and they can vote it, and it didn't matter, right? Trump was
But
impeached twice.
maybe what you could do is you could call a change of government of the leader, right? So right now you have the Speaker of the House who basically is a toady for Donald Trump. He'll do whatever Trump wants him to
But
do.
by design,
But
remember Kevin, what's
yeah,
his face? Kevin McCarthy.
but what happens if you have a coalition where the Speaker of the House has to assemble nobody has a majority, so the Speaker has to put two or three parties together in order to run the Congress. And if one of
Hmm.
those parties drops out, the Speaker also loses, and then at least maybe you have the chance of having an opposition Speaker in place who can be a check on the executive. Maybe that's something we should think more about.
I think that ends up being Congress regulating itself, which we've seen has failed. They need to be able to regulate the executive more firmly, or something where then a Trump-like figure can't come in and say, I hate you, Kevin McCarthy. You will never be speaker again. I want this guy over here. Therefore, that guy, Mike Johnson is going to do whatever he can to hold on to power. So it's about the checks on power. And if we don't have each of the branches exercising their checks on power. Like, for example, right now we see the judiciary, right? It's been stacked with many Republican judges, Federalist judges, Trump judges. Even the Trump judges are disagreeing with him on immigration policy right now, right? So what is he doing? He is showing where he can that he can arrest judges. He will find ways to hold people accountable to send a message to the rest of the judicial branch. Trying to arrest that judge in Wisconsin the other day, which I think is fascinating that he's picking a fight in the state that he barely won, a state that has many voting rights challenges and ballot challenges still being determined about what the voting rights can be in that state. And so he's intimidating judges there now to make sure that they do what he wants to.
Right. And remember, we just had that election there for the state judge, and it was a
Or the
huge
Supreme
turn
Court judge,
for the
which was
Supreme Court.
amazing that
Yeah.
Elon Musk lost.
Yeah.
No one knew she was
Exactly. It
running
must
against
lost.
Elon Musk, by the way, but she was running against Elon Musk.
And so what we know now is that if you the Musk is beatable, that Trump is beatable in these states, and even though he won the state by a hair, he's beatable. So if I'm a politician in one of these states, Michigan, Wisconsin, I don't know, Georgia, North Carolina, some of these states where Trump won by less than 4 or 5 points, I would be a little nervous that maybe Trump can't save me, and and if I have to face the general electorate, I need to be a little bit more on side of the people,
Mm-hmm.
at least
Oh,
against the autocrat.
that's the other piece, right? When we talk about our broader systemic challenges and you want to do the comparative piece to overseas, the UK elections don't start the day after the last one ends. It's about 3-4 month cycle. There is public funding. I mean, yes, there's all sorts of challenges with how money works in their system, but it's nothing like how money works in ours, where years in advance people are trying to fundraise from the oligarchs and the billionaires to just to be considered viable, and that's within the Democratic Party. That's even within the People's Party. Forget about the Republican side of the picture. So the way Citizens United, that ruling, allowed money to play into politics, it's as close to buying a seat as you can get. And there's really no senator left, I think, who isn't personally wealthy at this point, right? Even the guy who took over the seat, knocked out John Tester from Montana, who was a farmer, working guy from Montana, was a carpetbagger, some guy who made his millions in tech and that just came and bought a nice place in Montana, got all this outside support, and now he's a U.S. senator. So uh, we're definitely missing some of our own checks in the system. It's not just Trump. Trump just knew how to take advantage about all of those
Yeah,
gaps.
so I'm going to circle back to the conversation again about the parties, because I'm thinking, if you have Mitt Romney and Marjorie Taylor Greene in the same party, is that really representative of, what the Republican Party is supposed to be for? Or if you have Bernie Sanders and, I don't know, Seth Moulton, right, in the
Mhm.
same party, maybe that's not really representative of where the Democrats are. I know Bernie Sanders is barely a Democrat; he only caucuses with the Democrats, but maybe you need a Democratic Socialist Party in caucus in Congress, and you need a new Democrat party caucus in Congress, and maybe there's some allegiance that happens between the Seth Moultons of the world and the, Long Island, middle of the road Republicans from New York or California. Maybe they should be in the same party and shouldn't be opposite. I don't know. It just feels like the way we are divided up now, it's just blues versus reds, and you end up signing up for stuff that you might not agree with. I mean, Josh Gottheimer has got to be in the same party with Ilhan Omar, and it's clear they don't agree with each other on very much at all, right? And so, but we just do it because we think that's where it ought to be. And I think
Well,
maybe
and the thing
we need
is,
to think about
people
some
aren't doing
alternate
it.
structures.
Let's be that's what's happening in Congress and in DC, but people aren't doing it anymore. The largest political party right now is unaffiliated,
Yeah, so
right?
maybe you affiliate them and they have somebody who's actually speaking for their
That's the thing. Like,
agenda,
I
right?
think
Like
people are
you
like this.
send
Yeah,
Cory
this
Bush out
binary,
there. Yeah.
this binary red and blue thing. My daddy's Democrat and my mama's Republican Party, or whatever you want to call it. Like, that's not working for the majority of Americans anymore. And actually, so I think the whole party system is failing. People will still show up to vote, but they're not used. Like, the party is no longer a place where you're going to gather and be social and feel some kind of civic and community connection. I mean, it's this thing that people disdain as partisan. And so the only people who end up really being active in the party are those who are really passionate about changing it and dedicate their lives, or the ones who are benefiting from it, the consultant contracts, the folks who've been in office a long time, and this is their operation and how they keep getting reelected. But I just think the whole party structure and system has failed most Americans.
Yeah. So, right. So you want to run for president. That's probably a red versus blue, right? So,
Yep.
because you need to have a
Yep.
big platform and voice.
Crazy
So
operation in
you keep
place.
a national party structure for
Mm-hmm.
the big national elections. But it seems like in the states and in the state legislatures and maybe even in the Congress and some of the mayors, like, why not have a bunch of ballot lines? I know
Mm-hmm.
people have these ballot lines, but then you get elected and then you side back up with the
Yeah,
team.
that's the
But
problem. Is when
maybe
they
it's
get
like,
elected, they size back up. Yeah.
you got to
Yeah.
organize, make it hard for these speakers of the House or these state legislative leaders, and bring together, like,
Mm-hmm.
Democratic Socialists. Hey, Working Families Party, we're all going to combine and go for this particular part of the agenda. Okay, now that's over. Now we want to do a tax cut. You guys aren't up for the tax cut. Okay, now we got to go find some
Mm-hmm.
new Democrats and some reasonable Republicans and so whatever. Okay, now we put that coalition together. You know what I mean? Like, let's have a representative thing, and so I know what to judge you on as a citizen about whether or not I think you're actually representing me.
It's also the what I like that is changing in many different states now, and New York City is going to be the next one up with their mayoral election, ranked choice voting, because the
Mm-hmm.
idea that a mayor can be elected with only 250,000 voters in favor of him, that was Bill de Blasio. Like, something like 750,000 people voted for him, which is not even remotely the majority. He just happened to be the guy who got the most. But ranked choice voting allows you to rank and therefore say, okay, if it's not this first choice, here's a second. And the way they tabulate it, it's a far more accurate reflection of if maybe more people get their second choice, but at least they're getting somebody that they picked,
Yeah,
and then thought
exactly.
should be in leadership. I think that'll be really interesting in this next New York City election. We're seeing it in many, many other states, but that idea of it's what you're touching on. How do we make our democracy actually representative of the people
We
versus
got to fix something. We
right?
got
It's
to
like
fix something, right?
the way the voting rules. We got to fix those. Fixing the way Congress and legislators work. I mean, for example, like, here's
Term
the other
limits on Supreme Court justices, maybe.
right, right, because
you
again,
know,
when the founders thought about this, and they were also, and many of them in their 20s and 30s, they didn't expect people to last till 80 years old. They're like,
Exactly.
Ben Franklin in his 50s was old. That was good. Like, they're like, that's it.
Right. That's it. All right. So, I mean, you got to do that. You got to figure out how do you, we did this where we brought the senators, right? Senators are now popularly
Mm-hmm.
elected and not, just picked by the party infrastructure. So over time, these things do happen, right? It's
Yeah,
not
they do
like,
change.
it's like,
They
oh my
do.
God, we don't know if we can make these changes. We just
Mm-hmm.
started electing senators in the last 100 years. I mean, that was like the 1920s when we started doing that. So this can happen. We can fix this stuff.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's changing. I think the more it changes at the local level, the more incentive there will be at the national level, right? Because the
It has to
people
start
going
there.
to Congress will be from those cities and those towns that have already embraced this and understand that this is the way to make things more representative and democratic. Yeah, because I can tell you, I just finished semester with undergrads, and the poli sci and policy studies majors, and only one of
They
them
thought you were
actually
an
wants to run
undergrad.
for office. Yeah,
Do
actually,
they
that was
think
kind
you're
of
an
funny.
undergrad?
There is one student in another class who tried to hit on me on the first day.
Ah.
And then the second
Just
day I said,
one? Come on,
"Oh,
Nayyera.
no, it was just one. It was just one." And
Okay.
then the second day, I introduced myself. I was like, "Oh, are you so and so? Oh, I'm Professor Hawk. I teach the other class." And oh my God, his face. It was glorious, actually. And it
That's
wasn't
great.
even like he was cute flirting with me. It was kind of like gross. So I didn't feel bad
Oh,
about
I'm
it.
sorry.
Yeah, it was kind of
I'm
gross.
sorry.
He did that
Okay.
whole, "Oh, you're in an elevator. Let me stand right in front of you and loom over you and kind of put my arm on the side." And, like, "Hey,
Come on, dude. What
how
is
are
this,
you
Happy
today?"
Days?
Yeah. I was
All
like, dude. Um, that was
right,
funny.
I'm gonna kick you in the
But
nuts. Wait for me.
for all of these students who are in DC and they care in politics, only one really wanted to run for office because everybody else is like, "Oh no, I can't fundraise," or, "Oh, that's just gross." I'm like, these are all people who care about policy and politics and they don't actually want to ever be in elected office. That's a problem. Because then who are you drawing into office? The people who want to be fundraising, who want to call somebody on the worst day of their life and say, "Oh, I'm so sorry your husband died. It's terrible. He was such a great member of
Mm,
the community." And, it would be so helpful. I know it would mean a lot to him if you gave me $250 and got me to my goal. Right? Like that, you have to be able to say, like, these people say
you
this
do.
all the
You
time.
do. You do.
And that's who we incentivized the system for, is people who can do that, not the ones who are actually out there trying to make changes happen.
Yeah. Yeah, look, I think it's gonna be hard for us to get this system to work with the current structure. Especially now we know what's happening in technology. We know how many people have different things. I worry about it. Like we start atomizing ourselves even more,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where we don't have these big institutions that allow us to have to make compromises. Instead, you have a bunch of people who dig in on their own in particular issue. And maybe the smaller the parties are, the more easily they can be manipulated by
Mm-hmm.
billionaires, right? So if you're an oligarch, you just go around and buy you a new party, and then those people all have to do what it is that you say because you pay for everything for them. So there
Oh,
are some
speaking of that one,
pitfalls to this idea. Yeah.
speaking of that one, buying your own party, Elon Musk effectively tried to do that. Right?
Hmm.
He's like, "I'm going to throw a bunch of money into Trump's get out the vote effort. I'm going to go join the government, try to get whatever insights I can." He slightly got blocked from the Pentagon from getting insights on China, and that's only because the White House chief of staff complained. Hegseth would have given him everything. So he didn't get all of his China information that he wanted to be able to do who knows what with, to get advantages for his plants in China. But he's gotten a lot. He's gotten people's social security numbers, their taxpayer information, and he tried to effectively buy and bribe out a judicial seat in Wisconsin. He's on a clock with the White House, though. He's a special government advisor. It's 130 days. We've talked about 100 days for Trump. Elon Musk was a huge part of that. Do we really think he's going to go away in 30 days? Like, is this just the shiny toy? He kind of broke it and now he's done. He's going to move on?
Yeah, I don't know that we can expect him to do that, right? I mean, we think that this guy is really trying to change the government by buying the government, and there's no way that we can let that go on. Again,
Mm-hmm.
we've got to figure out a way to stop these oligarchs, or it's going to be oligarchs versus oligarchs, right? Everybody has to go out and find their own billionaire, and you get your billionaire, and my billionaire fight your billionaire, and we'll see how it all
That's your
works out when
billionaire
it gets
avatar.
elected in the suit.
It's going to be your billionaire avatar. Yeah. So we fight it out. Well, I do think that the fight continues. I think we certainly know that much. 100 days. Whew. Oh
100
gosh.
days. Got it. Now, the
How much?
question for
How
me is going to be now, what about the next 100 days? And are the Democrats and the progressives and everybody else going to do something in the next 100 days that actually protects us and builds upon it and creates a society that we want? Are we going to do anything other than
I got
just make a lot of.
I do appreciate Chris Van Hollen showing up for the Maryland resident and going to El Salvador, putting pressure on, demanding that he lay eyes on the person from his community. And that's literally, it made me feel like, oh, if I get disappeared somewhere, my senator would try to show up for me. That's awesome because he is my senator.
Right.
And I think more of that, more of the, yeah, maybe they'll say it's performative, but at least you're trying. You're trying to use the extent of
Hmm.
your power. I don't want to hear about another letter, a strongly worded letter that I sent
Right.
the executive
I sent a
branch.
strongly worded letter to them. How dare you?
Okay, because these people care anything about paper or processes or any of these other things? Come on. That doesn't mean anything at this point, right? They're literally showing up to buildings, kicking people out, and taking over their computers. They literally
It's
declared
happening.
in the Social Security Administration, they literally declared people who weren't dead, dead. They took over the dead list and said, these people are now dead. What?
I
Right?
know.
So
I know.
it is the Democrats, progressives, everybody needs to fight on the same turf. Like, understand this is not the old things you used to do. They haven't worked. They didn't work to stop Trump from getting reelected. They're certainly not going to work to stop him and Elon Musk for tearing down our government.
They're not going to stop it. And we are all going to be paying the price for another generation if we don't figure out how to stop it. That is the truth.
All right. Well, we got to figure it out, Jamal.
Oh,
maybe not
we got
today.
to figure it out.
Not
today, but we'll figure it out. Yeah, we can do it. We can do it. We can do it. All right,
Thanks, friend.
everybody. Yes, thank you. This is a great time. We will see you all next time on Jailbait.